Alright guys, today we're comparing the Galaxy S9 Plus to the S10e, two older flagships, and what makes this comparison pretty interesting is that they're around the same price. So if you're thinking about getting one over the other, let's go ahead and break it down and see the pros or cons of each one. Alright, so hardware wise on the S9 Plus we have a premium glass and metal design, and I really love this purple color. I think it looks really great. Physical fingerprint scanner on the back here. Bixby button, volume rockers, USB Type-C. We also get our headphone jack and stereo speakers. And on the S10e, it's the same story. We do have glass and metal, and on here we've got our fingerprint scanner actually in the power button, which is really nice. And we also have our Bixby button, volume rockers, USB Type-C, headphone jack, and stereo speakers as well. And the first thing you'll notice right off the bat is that, you know, the S10e, it's a compact phone, so it's much smaller than the Plus, as you can see here. And honestly, they're about the same in thickness as well, so it's not like the S10e is, you know, thinner than it. Yeah, they're definitely the same in thickness, but again, obviously if you want a smaller phone, then you would go with the S10e. The Plus is obviously a little bit bigger here. Alright, so let's talk about display quality here. On the S9 Plus, we have a Super AMOLED HDR10 display. It's at 6.2 inches. It's actually a 2K or 1440p display, and it is $529 for the PPI. On the S10e, we have a dynamic AMOLED display, HDR10 Plus. It's 5.8 inches, 1080p, $438 for the PPI. So the differences with each display is that on the S9 Plus, you have a much higher resolution display, so it is much sharper. And it also does not have a punch hole. It does have a curve to it, which could be a pro or a con depending on if you like curved displays or not. And then on the S10e, we obviously have a much smaller display, so it's easier to reach for someone with smaller hands. You do have a punch hole, but you also have slimmer bezels on the S10e as well. So this comes down to personal preference. Me personally, I do prefer the S9's display here. I could take the extra bezel because you are getting just a higher resolution display, and also you're not getting a punch hole. Now I do like to have fun with the S10e's punch hole display. As you can see, I got Goku up there doing the spirit bomb. But yeah, it really comes down to personal preference, and I also do love that the S10e is more compact, so you can kind of reach it you know, with one hand. So it really comes down to your personal preference on display quality here. Alright, so on the S10e, we do have the Snapdragon 855 running Android 11 here. It is the Adreno 640 for the GPU, micro SD support. We also have 128 gigs of internal storage and 6 gigs of RAM. On the S9 Plus, we have the Snapdragon 845 running Android 10. We also have the Adreno 630, micro SD support, 64 gigs of internal storage, and 6 gigs of RAM. So as far as speed, I haven't done a speed test, so let's go ahead and just run one real quick here. Let's open up the Geekbench. And I'll actually show you the latest, the Geekbench scores here. As you can see, these are what your scores will actually look like. Here, as you can see, the S10e is obviously going to be the more powerful device here, but with a real world, you know, test here, we shouldn't see too much of a difference here. So let's go ahead and let's open back up Subway Surf. Boom, we're in. So not too bad. They both are pretty neck and neck still. Let's go ahead and try YouTube. Oh, it looks like, yeah, it looks like the S9 Plus actually slightly got it there. Let's go ahead and try, let's try the Play Store. Yeah, it looks, the S9 Plus is actually kind of a little bit faster here. Now let's try a heavier game like PUBG here. Now, I don't think we'll see a big difference in terms of graphic performance here. Like I said, you know, the 845 to the 855 is not a massive jump in power. Maybe in the long term you might see, you know, but other than that, I don't really think so. And it looks like we're in on the S10e. So it did load up PUBG a little bit faster. So that was a pretty, actually a pretty decent Actually got in there at a decent amount of time. Now as far as just the graphics, as you can see here, extreme on the S10e, boom, boom, boom. We got extreme all the way up, and we can go to Ultra HD. So on here, on the S9 Plus, extreme, and then you can't do extreme. So the S10e sort of wins right off the bat, and you can't do Ultra HD. So it's just faster. As you can see, we're on HDR. We can do up to extreme. So the S10e is going to be the better phone as far as gaming. You will be able to play, you know, better graphics at still a very nice frame rate here. But then, you know, also another thing to take into account is, you know, just overall display here. Do you want to game on a bigger display, or do you want to game on a smaller display? Which actually, gaming on smaller displays is not a big deal for me, at least, because I like, you know, I just like small phones. But yeah, so that's something that, you know, you're gonna have to take into consideration as well. All right, let's go ahead and test out the speaker quality and see which one is louder here. Starting off with the S10e. Now the S10e does sound a lot more crispier, but as far as volume and bass, they are about the same. Yeah, I would go with the more crispy sound on the S10e, but they're almost identical in terms of the sound signature here. Alright, so let's talk about the additional features here. So you do have NFC on both phones. You do have an IP rating on both phones as well. If we check out our toggles on here, we have about the same toggles. We have Samsung desktop support on both of these devices as well. We do have secure folder on both of these devices. Now our wireless power sharing, we do not have that feature on the S9 Plus, and just to show you what that is, if I turn that on, I can actually charge the S9 with the S10e. So we do not have that on the S9. But everything else is still pretty much on here. Screen recording, all of your little essential stuff is still on here, which is really nice. So I do want to talk about software. So you do have a lot of support for the S9 Plus. Even though it did not get the Android 11 update, you do have a lot of support with ROMs and stuff like that, so you can go that route. And I think the S10e may have another last year of software as far as Android 12. They both still get security patches, which is great, so that's really awesome. And let's talk about the fingerprint scanner situation too. So I do prefer this method, and I think it comes down to personal preference. I prefer to have the fingerprint scanner, you know, on the side of the power button. Now as you can see, you also have a face unlock on the S10e as well. The way they do it on the S9 is that they put it on the back here, so as you can see, boom. And it's just like, I like being able to like assign it to this finger just when I compare phones and just unlock it like that, as opposed to just picking it up. So that's why I say it's a personal preference sort of thing. But yeah, so let's talk about image quality, and before I show you guys the stills from each one, the big difference is, do you want an ultra wide? Because there's not a huge difference in there's not a huge difference when it comes to image quality to me, you know, just taking photos. So the S10e has an ultra wide, so you can see, boom, I bounced out 0.5. Now the S9 Plus has a telephoto lens, as you can see, I zoom in 2x and I still keep that crispiness. That it comes down to whether you take a lot of, you know, ultra wide photos. Like me, I do not, so I would be fine with a telephoto lens. But again, ultra wide is always nice to have. It's like the main secondary camera for a lot of people, so definitely take that into consideration. But just to go over the specs, on the S9 Plus, 12 megapixel standard, 12 megapixel telephoto, 4K video, 30 or 60 FPS, 8 megapixel selfie cam, and you do have a dedicated iris scanner on the S9 Plus as well, and that shoots in 1440p. And the shots look great on the S9 Plus. Honestly, it's aged so well for an older flagship phone. You still get pretty crispy shots, good detail, good dynamic range. It handles white balance pretty well. You also get, like I said, really crispy shots with that telephoto lens on here. So portrait modes look great, selfies are pretty good. So, you know, for the price point of both of these phones, I absolutely love image quality S10e 12 megapixel selfie, 12 megapixel standard, and then a 16 megapixel ultra wide. 4K video on here as well. You do have a 10 megapixel selfie cam, and that shoots in 4K as well too. And S10e also takes some excellent shots, especially for this price point. Just an awesome camera, as you can see from the images. Great detail. The ultra wide is very good as well. The selfie cam is pretty good. Video quality is really good. So overall, you'll be happy with the cameras on both of these phones. It just comes down to, do you want the ultra wide or the telephoto? Alright, so let's go ahead and talk about battery life. So on the S9 Plus, you have a 3,500 milliamp battery with 15 watt charging with wireless charging. On the S10e, you have a 3,100 milliamp battery with 15 watt charging with wireless charging and reverse wireless charging like we just saw. Basically, better battery life on the S9 Plus here. You will get around 6 hours of screen on time as opposed to the 4 hours of screen on time on the S10e. So you will get much better battery life. If that is your concern, I would go with the S9 Plus if you're choosing between the two of these devices. So that is pretty much it. I absolutely love both of these devices. Great pros and cons for each one. So which one would you guys go with? Be sure to let me know, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.